everybody, these are the circumference and area circle notes. To get started, we're going to talk about some vocabulary of circles. As we go through the notes, we'll get more specific on this vocabulary. Let's first start with a radius. If we have a circle, the radius is a line segment that goes from the middle of the circle to the edge. The diameter is a line segment that goes from edge to edge of a circle but passes through the middle. The circumference of a circle is the distance around the circle. This distance right here. This symbol right here is called pi. Pi is the ratio of the circumference of a circle to the diameter. The area of a circle can be thought of this region inside right here. And it is defined as the number of square units that fit inside the circle. Okay, going on to the next page, we are going to talk about the relationship of the radius and the diameter and how that relates to circumference. How does the diameter of a circle relate to the radius? If you go back, remember that the radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the edge. The diameter is going across the circle, but also going through the middle. So the diameter would be twice the radius. Fill in the missing information in the table. So if we look at this table here, it gives us the radius of various circles, and then we have to do the diameter or vice versa. If the radius is 7 inches, then the diameter of the circle would be double that, so it would be 14 inches. If the diameter is 12 meters, then the radius would be half that, 6 meters. If the radius is 2.5 centimeters, the diameter would be double that. It would be 5 centimeters. If the diameter is 9 feet, the radius would be half that at 4.5 feet. Write pi as a ratio between the circumference and diameter. Okay, so pi is a ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. So we're going to write it as C over D, and that C will stand for circumference, and this D will stand for the diameter of a circle. Remember, the circumference is the distance around the circle. Using your equation, solve for the circumference of a circle. We know that pi is equal to the circumference divided by the diameter. So instead of saying pi equals, we want it to say circumference equals. So we're going to multiply both sides by the diameter. These will cross out. And so now we have diameter times pi equals circumference. Or flipping that around, circumference equals diameter times the pi. Write the circumference formula in terms of the radius. So that means instead of writing diameter, we are going to write radius. Now diameter is 2 times the radius. So diameter and 2 times the radius means the same thing. And so instead of writing diameter times pi, we're going to write 2 times the radius times pi, which means the same thing. Write your 2 equations to calculate the circumference of a circle in the rectangle below. So we have this equation. So the circumference of the circle equals the diameter times pi. That would be perfect to use if we know the diameter. Or we have this equation right here, which is the circumference equals 2 times the radius times pi, which is great to use if we know the radius. On the next page, we're going to practice calculating the circumference. The circumference of a circle is a distance. It's just the distance around the circle. Therefore, if the diameter of a circle is measured in meters, then the circumference would have the units of, it's going to use the same units. So if the diameter uses meters, then the circumference is going to use meters. Why is it impossible to exactly write the circumference of a circle using only digits? If I have my calculator and I hit the pi button and I hit equals, pi is actually an irrational number, which means it's a number that goes on forever without repeating. So your calculator will show various digits of the pi, but know that this number will go on forever. So it's 3.141 and you can see it just keeps going and going, and it can't show all the digits. I cannot actually write the exact number of pi because pi will never end. So I can't write all the digits of pi. And because I can't write all the digits of pi, I can't actually write the exact number of a circumference because the circumference will also go on forever. Because if I multiply a number by pi, the number is going to continue forever in decimal form, but continue forever. So I can't write the exact actual answer of a circumference. Therefore, to write the exact circumference or area of a circle, we often write the answer in terms of pi. If the diameter of a circle is 12, the exact form of the circumference would be, so remember the circumference of the circle is the diameter of a circle times the number pi. And so we often write it as 12 times the number pi. Writing the approximate form of the circumference or area is also common. The approximate form of the circumference of a circle with a diameter of 12 would be, so this is when you use your calculator. So you would type in 12 times the symbol pi equals, and it will give you the approximate answer. Like actually this number goes on forever, but we can't actually write that all down. Now sometimes when you're taking tests, it will say use 3.14 for pi. It will tell you what numbers to use for pi, and that's just so when they grade it, they can get all the exact same answers. And when I write an approximate, I like to use the about symbol, which is an equal sign squiggly. Let's go down on the bottom for more practice. It says calculate the circumference of a circle when the radius equals 8 meters. So this time it gives me the radius, so I'm going to do the formula where it's 2 times the radius times pi. So that's going to be 2 times the radius, which is 8, times pi. Now I'm going to write my solution both in exact form and approximate form. So my exact form is 16 because 2 times 8 is 16, 16 pi meters. Approximately, and this is when I use my calculator, I'm going to go 16 times the pi symbol, and I get 50.2. And rounding, we'll say 50.3 meters. On the next one, it says calculate their circumference, and it just tells me that the diameter, because I see the line going across, so the diameter is 7 inches. So this time I'm going to use the circumference formula using the diameter. So the diameter times pi. So circumference equals 7 times pi. So that is my exact form, 7 pi symbol inches. And the approximate form is 7 times pi symbol equals 21.99. So we'll say that's about 22 inches. Next question, it says calculate the radius. Circumference equals 5 times pi feet. All right, so that means this number right here has to be the diameter, right? Because I know that the circumference equals the diameter times pi. But it's not asking me for the diameter, it's asking me for the radius. So the radius is going to be half the diameter, which is going to be 2.5. Calculate the diameter. Okay, so here it tells us that the circumference is 12.56 centimeters. And if you notice right here, it tells us to use 3.14 for pi. This is just to make sure that everybody gets the same answer, and we're not going to have rounding errors with the irrational number of pi. So the circumference is 12.56. We know that's equal to the diameter times pi, and I'm using diameter because the question is asking me for the diameter, so I'm going to use the diameter equation. So 12.56 equals diameter times pi. Now it wants me to use 3.14 for pi. So instead of pi, I'm going to write in 3.14. Now I need to solve for the diameter, so I'm going to divide each side by 3.14 to figure out what my diameter is. And then 12.56 divided by 3.14 equals 4, and my units are centimeters. On to the next page. Now we're going to be talking about the area of a circle. So we're going to break up a circle into equal pieces and rearrange the pieces. So look at the circle right here. It's divided into 8 equal slices, and then it's rearranged into this shape. So these are the same pieces that are in this. Just think of like cutting them out and rearranging them in this pattern. So if we look up at this pattern, this new shape resembles a, so if we look at this shape, we're just going to kind of outline it here. This shape resembles a parallelogram. The formula for the area of a parallelogram is area equals the base times the height of the parallelogram, the perpendicular height of the parallelogram. So if we look at our parallelogram up here at the top, the perpendicular height is going to be this distance right here, right? That is our height of our parallelogram. And that, if you notice, if I draw that same picture on my circle, that is the radius of the parallelogram. The base of the parallelogram is equal to, so now let's look at this right here. This is the base of my parallelogram. Now, if I were to draw that same distance on this circle right here, I would just be drawing four slices, because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bottom. So that's going to be half the distance of the circumference. So we've got the radius, we've got half the distance of the circumference, and that's going to give me the area of this parallelogram. The area of the parallelogram. So remember that to find the area of a parallelogram, it's the base times the height. So my base is half the circumference times the height, which is my radius. Rewrite this formula in terms of radius only. So instead of, see how it says circumference and radius, we're going to rewrite circumference using our circumference formula for radius. So instead of circumference right here, we're going to write 2 times pi times r, because that is the same as circumference. So now it says 2 times pi times r divided by 2, and then times the radius. Now we can cancel out those 2's right there. So now it just equals pi times the radius, or in other words, pi times the radius squared. Remember, the area of the circle and the parallelogram are the same. Therefore, the formula for the area of the circle is going to be the same as the area of the parallelogram that we just figured out. So pi times the radius squared. And we are going to write this formula down here. The area of a circle A is equal to pi times the radius squared. On to the next page where we're going to do some practice problems. Since area is units square, if the radius of the circle is meters, the units of the area would be meters squared. Because remember, with area, we're talking about how many square units can cover a shape. So that continues on even with circles. Calculate the area when the radius equals 2 meters. So the area equals pi times the radius squared. So that's going to be equal to pi times 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so we're going to write 4 pi. Now I could write pi 4 or 4 times pi, but it's a little bit more common to write 4 and then the pi symbol. So remember, our exact solution is 4 times pi symbol meters squared. The approximate solution, and this is when I'm going to use my calculator, 4 times pi, and I get 12.56, and we're just going to round that to the 10th. So we're going to write is about 12.6 meters squared. Calculate the area, and it tells me that the diameter, well, it shows me here that the diameter is 6 inches. So with the area formula, we need to know the radius. So the diameter is 6, therefore the radius is going to be 3. Using our formula, area equals pi times the radius squared, which means that it's pi times 3 squared, which is equal to 3 squared is 9. Pi times 9, or 9 times pi. So my exact solution is 9 pi square inches. My approximate solution is 9 times pi, 28.27. And we'll round that to the nearest tenth. So it's going to be about 28.3 inches squared. Next question, it says calculate the radius if the area equals 25 pi. So I know my area equals 25 pi, so that is equal to pi r squared. If I divide both sides by pi, that cancels out my pi. So now it just says that my radius squared equals 25. If my radius squared equals 25, that must mean that my radius is the square root of that. So my radius must equals 5, because 5 times 5 is 25. So my radius r is equal to 5 feet. Calculate the diameter, and it says the area is about 153 and then 86 hundredths, and then it tells me to use 3.14 for pi. So I know my area is about 153 and then 86 hundredths, and that is equal to pi times the radius squared. I need to figure out what my diameter is. So my plan, I'm thinking in my head, is if I can figure out the radius, and then I can go back and figure out the diameter. Now it tells me to use 3.14 for pi. So I'm going to take my 3.14 here and plug it in there for my pi symbol. So 103.86 equals 3.14 times the radius squared. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 3.14. 153 and 86 hundredths divided by 3.14, I get 49, and that is equal to my radius squared. So I know some number squared equals 49. To figure that out, I can take the square root, and I get 7, because 7 times 7 equals 49. So that means that my radius equals 7, but remember that it's asking for my diameter, so that must mean that the diameter is 2 times the radius, so the diameter must be 14. Okay, now we're going to do some real-world applications of circles. Jenna's bike wheels have a diameter of 26 inches. Jenna travels 1 mile on her bike. About how many times did her wheels rotate? Use the space below to show your work. So if I'm talking about the distance that her wheels are going to rotate, I'm going to be using circumference here. All right, so I know the diameter is 26 inches. When Jenna's bike makes 1 revolution, that is going to be the same as 1 circumference. So if I can figure out the circumference, I know that's going to be 1 rotation. So the circumference of a circle is, and I'm going to use the diameter because it tells me the diameter. So if I can figure out the diameter times pi, and that's going to give me about, 26 times pi, which is about, let's use my calculator here, which is about 81.68 inches. When she makes 1 rotation, she's going 81.68 inches. Now, it wants me to know how many times did her wheels rotate for a mile. So it's asking me mile, I have inches. Let's do some math here. I know, and if you don't know this, you can look it up on a conversion chart, but I know that 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. I can convert that to inches because if I multiply that by 12, because there are 12 inches in a foot, and that will give me 63,360 inches. So that's how many inches are in a mile. I know that 1 rotation is 81.68 inches, and I want to know how many rotations she will go for 63,360 inches. So I am going to divide here. 63,000 360. And I want to know how many times will 81.68 go into that. And that's going to equal about 775.71 rotations. Now let's go through and answer these questions. It says, about how many times did her wheel rotate? About 775 times. Did you use the circumference or area of her wheel to help you solve this problem? Well, we use the circumference. And why? Well, because circumference is a distance, and I needed to determine the distance of a rotation. At the park, Bob ties his dog leash to a pole. The dog's leash is 6 feet long. How much area does the dog have to play? Think of him running around this pole, right? With the pole in the middle. We need to figure out area. I know that the leash is 6 feet long. The area that he can play in is just going to be the area of this circle here with the pole in the middle. So that's giving me the radius, because as he goes around, the leash is going to stay tied to the pole in the middle and it will go around. So the area of a circle is equal to pi times the radius squared. And I know that the radius is 6, so pi times 6 squared, which equals pi times 36. So the exact answer is 36 pi feet squared. The approximate answer is 36 times pi, which is about 113 feet squared. All right, everybody, that's it for today. Have a good one.